Let's cut the bullshit.
Just drop the jargon.
Alan Simon's Bullshit Busters.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Small 99 podcast. My name is Simon Batchelor.
I'm Adam Bastock.
And
I'm
this
Tim
week...
Bullen.
Oh, that's all right. No, it's all good. Hello, Tim. And this week we are joined by Tim Bullen of the Secret Capsite to talk about their sustainability journey and also some of the things that they have been putting in place that are working. And yeah, just to share some ideas really. And I think explain a little bit about what's been going on so that others can learn and be inspired by some of the activities that other businesses are doing. So Tim, do you want to start off by giving us a little bit of a description about what the Secret Campsite is all about?
Yeah, so the Secret Campsite opened in 2012 and it was on the site of an old garden centre. We had some buildings and we had a landscape that was probably just been overworked as a nursery. We got rid of all the infrastructure and then over time we decided that a campsite would be a great thing for us to launch there. So we did a lot of landscaping. I went on a Sussex Wildlife Trust landscaping course to understand how you could manage a landscape to increase the amount of biodiversity you get there. And biodiversity is the big focus of everything we do at the Secret Campsite. It's all about trying to create a space where nature can really thrive, really flourish. But the people who are coming camping and staying with us have a chance to connect with it. So for me, the Secret Campsite it's a very simple proposition. It's nature, it's peace, and it's space. And so it's that's what we're all about.
Brilliant. I think that's why I really wanted to kind of get you onto the podcast and talk to you, because there's some really cool, small and big things that you're doing on the campsite that really demonstrate that what a decarbonisation journey looks like, but in a slightly more kind of engaging and exciting way that isn't just a spreadsheet. And I think we met on the Clean Growth UK Net Zero 360 course, where it was then taking you through the carbon calculator, and just through that process really highlighted the difficulty we had. And I think one of the examples was that you don't have many lights on site. So like your energy usage is so low that it was like, well, I don't have anything to put in here. And, the normal things of saying, oh, well, let's do some LEDs. You're like, no, I don't want to do that because we don't want to have any lights. So can you expand on like some of the things that you've done on the site that are perhaps weird and wonderful? Well,
the course was a real eye-opener because it was looking at our carbon footprint. And for me, the focus, as I said, is all about biodiversity. But behind the scenes, we're obviously trying to do a lot of things that are really acknowledging the kind of sustainability of the site. I don't know if that's a word I'm allowed to use anymore. But we already had some solar PV systems on the roof. A lot of the energy we use is for heating hot water because we obviously have hot showers. We don't really have any lights on. There's not much else that is very energy demanding. But one of the things that we really did quite quickly work out is that the biggest carbon footprint was all the people who are coming in their cars to come and stay with us. And that's a difficult one to take on because you can shut your business down and you won't have any campers arriving in cars. But that's kind of the end of it all then. So it's one of the things that we are trying to work our way through in terms of our carbon footprint. How do we discourage people turning up in a diesel car? So one of the things we did was we've got this PV system on the barn roof and it's pretty big. It's 19 kilowatts. That's heating the hot water now. But we also decided we'd put some EV chargers in for the cars. So you could encourage people to come and fill up their car at a decent price when they're staying with us. And charging your car overnight is a pretty perfect time to do it because you're asleep in your tent, the car's charging. So that was one of the kind of, I guess one of the fallouts from the course was that we could start to address some of the issues we had quite easily by looking at the energy we're using and the way we could sort of nudge people in that direction. So, yeah, I think that was a good part. The next thing we did was we were looking at our old washhouse, or our shower block as it was then called, and we were trying to work out how we could move it from where it was in the wrong place on the site in an old nursery retail building. And I spoke to a number of people who could help me to design something. And the idea was to look at it from a very long-term perspective. So one of the big things we wanted to avoid was using any carbon, any concrete in the foundations for the wash house. The first design we had was from an architect who was just bog standard, and it came back and it looked like every other building you'd see. But the next one we were working with a company called Local Works, who are based in Barkham, which is the near village to us. And they had an architect who thought a bit differently. So we used the foundations, rather than putting concrete foundations in, we used old telegraph poles. And we have used the old telegraph poles, sunk them into the ground. They're held in place by, it's a kind of a gravel material, and they have a sleeve on them to stop them rotting. But they are the support for the structure. We use trees. So it's all made of wood. We use trees for the floorboards, and we use one, maybe two chestnut trees, but we use the whole tree. So the floorboards are all completely different widths. The roof, we bought all of the roof material from eBay. It's all recycled roofing material, got delivered here. Few problems when you do that, because obviously that means parts of it are going to leak, which they do. But the idea was to keep the whole shower and wash space really open. We used some brick waste from Chaley Brickworks, which is a brickworks which is a mile away, and that was reformulated to make a shower tray. Great for people who've got itchy feet, because you can rub your feet on the shower tray as you're having a shower. We've installed a rainwater harvesting system which flushes all of the toilets. It was easy to do. The big barn roof that we collect the solar electricity from, it collects about 330,000 litres of water every year. Wow. Sadly, most of that is during the winter when the campsite's shut. But by harvesting water from a building like that, you can avoid importing water just to flush a toilet. So that's been a great asset for us. And then that all gets flushed to a sewage treatment plant, which is powered by the solar PV from the barn roof. So that's another area where there's a demand from the site for electricity. Some sites have compost toilets. We did that when we first started, but quite quickly worked out that Joe Public doesn't really understand compost toilets. And when you don't understand a compost toilet, the results of that can be sometimes quite shocking. So a lot of the wash house build was all about trying to make use of materials we had on site. We had some other trees for the roof timbers, and they came from Crowber, which is about 8 miles away. So the whole building ended up being pretty low intensity in terms of the amount of carbon that we were using for it. And if you're using trees, I guess you're replanting those trees. So a lot of that has been offset by the way the land gets managed later on. We put in lots of spaces for wildlife. The site is all about wildlife. So within the wash house, we put bird boxes up, and we're about to put some bat boxes up around there as well now. But it's just been a case of trying to reflect the site. So it's a huge, big building. It's very open. It's very spacious. It's very light. The toilets are all on auto-sensor lights. There's no external lighting because we didn't want to interfere with the bats at night. So there's been lots of additional parts to the wash house, which I think have been a great asset for the site. I think they've been really good and a lot of fun to do. At the site, we've got 2 teams of ecologists who are based here, and one of the great things about that is that we can then start to see actually the impact of some of the things that we've been doing. And so at the site, we've got dormice, we've got great crested newts, we've got adders. There's a whole host of different wild. I mean, there's the more common things like hedgehogs, but lots of deer around, which are a bit of a mixed blessing. But the site is delivering, I think. It's really delivering on its biodiversity. And the fact that we've been able to look at the access to energy in and around the site, either the water or the sunlight, has been brilliant. So yeah, I don't know where that's led. Have I talked myself into a corner there?
No, I think it's really good as a demonstration of just like the scale of things you can do that make it interesting, and that it just demonstrates that businesses can be that sort of force for good and still be operating. One of the things I wanted to ask you really was, how have customers responded to this? The things like the leaky roof. Is that something that is like a good storytelling opener, or is that something that gets quite a lot of negative press or like attention from customers? What's the sort of feeling when they come onto site, and how do they respond?
I think the response we've had so far has been unbelievable, because we get lots of people who come back here year after year to come camping. And so they've been familiar with the old shower block, and no one ever complained about it, but it was just in the wrong place. And so actually now the ones that are coming back and are seeing the new shower block, the washhouse as it's called, the feedback's been unbelievable. When people, what we wanted to do was to let people understand what had gone through our minds as we were doing this. So I've explained all of those parts. There's signs around the building. So while you're brushing your teeth, you can read about what we've done for wildlife. While you're having a shower, well, actually not while you're having a shower, when you're washing up, you can have a look at the materials we used for actually building it and why we used the telegraph poles. So I think the feedback from customers has been fantastic. And there's a growing interest, I think, in the public, that we know that we need to tackle a few of these issues. So actually going somewhere where they go camping for a weekend, and camping is not an expensive weekend away, going somewhere where people have taken the care to actually try and acknowledge that and do something about it, I think it's great. It's worked really well. And as a business, because one of the things I think is really important with this is it's really easy to look at it and think everything is a cost. And although the wash house costs more than it would have done if we had built it a more traditional way, I think one of the things that we've found is that there's lots of parts to it that are actually make commercial sense. The EV chargers, you can make a bit of money on your EV chargers. The rainwater harvesting means you buy a bit less water. The solar PV on the roof means that you're not having to import as much electricity. So there's really good commercial benefits to these things as well. But sometimes you have to be prepared to put the investment in at the front to actually see the benefits of that, because it doesn't happen overnight.
I think it is seeing the bigger picture of it all and understanding what that looks like, and as you say, understanding your customers as well to see how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
Just going back to the electric car charging, have you seen like a shift in behaviour as a result of that?
Well, we've certainly got more electric cars. I mean, that probably is the public generally, but quite often now there'll be queues for people wanting to use the car. And when we first put them in, we didn't really have electric cars appearing at the site, but subsequently, I would say, on a typical weekend, we may have 3 or 4 electric cars there. We've got 2 chargers. I didn't locate them in quite the cleverest way. So actually, you can only be charging 1 car at a time. I say you can only be charging 1 car at a time. You can't have 2 cars waiting, one charging, one ready to charge. There's a few tweaks that you could do that would make it a bit better. But no, I think it's been well received by the campers that they can do that.
I think that's really the main point here, is that these shifts are coming, and it's how do you support and accelerate them, and how do you engage? Because the key thing with climate at a bigger level, to kind of bring that language in, is that there is that climate anxiety, and I think businesses that are able to relieve that by going, look, here's some electric vehicle charging, here's a building that's been built with natural materials that's really it been done differently, is going to help relieve that. And therefore there is also a marketing opportunity there, and a decision maker or a USP. It might not be the only reason someone's coming to visit your campsite, but I would imagine that it might be the deciding factor in choosing you over some of your competitors in the area, perhaps, because there's that level of interest and uniqueness that is there that is going to be beneficial to you. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that is true. And I would say particularly with our focus on biodiversity, which has been a really big part of what we do. I mean, it's the driver for what we do. And quite early on in our existence, we teamed up with the Wildlife Trust, the Sussex Wildlife Trust. And every year up until COVID, we ran a festival, the Secret Wildlife Festival, which was all about getting people connected with wildlife and nature. And it's brilliant. You'd have families coming down and they'd be seeing an extraordinary variety of moths, of mammals, of amphibians, of reptiles, birds. And what you've done is you've opened the eyes of a lot of people to the fact that this stuff is there. And as soon as people know it's there, they're much more likely to start championing it. At the moment, we're really lucky. We've got a growing population of nightingales that sing through the campsite in some habitat that we've managed, but we've had some great support from UK power networks and other local landowners. And when you do that and you reach out into the community and you talk to other people who share the space with you, it's amazing how many have a positive approach to actually what can be done. And so, the fact that we've now got these nightingales on site has enabled us to really to sort of reach out and start looking at some new audiences for the business. One of the things we've started doing, weekends and during the holidays, the campsite will be full most nights with families or couples, or sometimes just single people who just want to come on and get away. But then midweek during term time, there might be nobody here at all. And one of the things that I'd started to notice was that businesses and nature were starting to become much more aligned. People are starting to talk about business. They're starting to talk about nature and what are the impacts business has. So we launched this program called 24 Hours in Nature. And it was after some conversations with Sam Zindal from PropellerNet. And we were talking about the opportunity to get small teams away from maybe their home desk, and get them out into a natural environment where they could chat to their work colleagues who they may not see very often, because if everyone's working from home, you don't really spend a lot of time chatting to each other over the water cooler, because you're not in the same office anymore. So we started these events. People come and spend 24 hours with us. There's no alcohol served, which for surprisingly many of the people seems to be quite refreshing, that you go out with your work colleagues and it's not just about how many beers or cocktails you can drink. It's actually about what the conversations are. And they've been amazing. We've had a few companies come just to spend an evening listening to the nightingales. Halfway through the evening, you might get interrupted by some deer wandering through. It's just a very different way of spending time with work colleagues. So, and those things come when you start talking to your customers and the people who, are spending time in your business.
And has that helped bring in new revenue as a revenue stream away from the traditional sort of campers that are coming at weekends?
Yeah, it does. It's also great because we're needing to work with some other local suppliers. So we've got a wildlife guide, a guy called Michael Blenko, who lives locally but is increasingly quite well known. He's written some books. He's been on television, but he's providing the expertise about the wildlife. We've got a lady locally who does all of the catering, and a couple of people who do the catering. So it's a really, from my perspective, it's a great way of spreading your tentacles out into the community a bit, spreading some of the opportunity to other businesses. A lot of the stock that we stock in our shop, it's local beer, it's local cider, it's local meat boxes, and what you realise is the impact of your small business in a local area can be actually quite significant. Some of the local pubs, the trade they get when we're busy at the weekends, it's phenomenal. They're getting lots of people going for a country walk, stopping somewhere for a pint or go on the river on the boats, who otherwise might not be visiting. So yeah, we've become quite popular, really.
You sound surprised.
No, I just think it's it's one of those. I think it's one of those things they're not necessarily the reasons you start the business. The business was there because we had got a site, we had landscaped it for wildlife, and we loved the space we had created, but it didn't generate any revenue. So you had to work out a way that you could get some revenue from that. And I over the years I've been and spoken to lots of different landowners about the opportunities that they have to generate revenue from their land. And the campsite, it's not going to make you a millionaire, but you can earn a decent living from, if you do it well and if you're quite clear about your objectives. And it's a lot of fun.
I guess you also get to meet lots of new people as well, don't you? Because when people are choosing a place to camp, they're choosing a site that appeals to them. And I think when you're sort of putting forward some of your stories and some of the sort of ways in which you're choosing to operate your business, you are kind of attracting a group of people who are sort of maybe thinking on the same lines. But I think what you're then doing with your pieces around, while you're brushing your teeth, while you're doing the washing up, you're helping them understand more about the choices you've made and the reasons behind those choices. And, you were saying about the impact just on your local community. Well, actually, it's if you can get the campers thinking about things in a slightly different way, then you're influencing in a positive way hundreds of people every season, just getting them to think, oh yeah, actually we could maybe build that thing we're thinking of building in a different way, or maybe we could put EV chargers in, actually, because that's the reason we chose this campsite over the other campsite, is because we're not going to have to try and find somewhere to charge when we leave because the car's going to be topped up. Things like that, I think, make a real impact when you're getting a throughput of people like you are with the camping.
Well, it's one of the things that I really liked about when we started working with the Wildlife Trust. And the idea was to create this little festival where people could come along and spend a weekend finding out more about wildlife, looking at the stars and things. But actually, it then led to us, when people book a trip with us, it led to us putting a link on there, well, not a link, but a payment button. So actually, when they're booking a trip with us, they can also make a donation to the Wildlife Trust, which is a really simple thing to do. But last year it was I think we raised about £300 to the Wildlife Trust, just from people out of the goodness of their heart when they're booking, saying, oh, let's put £5 in for the Wildlife Trust. We became a business member of the Wildlife Trust. And, what I've realised is that, since we've started in 2012, we've raised about £20,000 for the Trust. Wow. By doing the festival, or through the having a little coin tub on reception, or the donations people can make when they check out with us. So, if you think a bit more broadly, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but one of my ideas was that maybe what we should do is, if you turn up in a diesel or an electric or a petrol car, you have to pay a car charge, and that charge can just go straight to the Wildlife Trust. If you charged everyone £2 to bring their car that wasn't an electric car, it's a pretty easy thing to do. And I think people who may not even have thought about the impact of their car, but when you say, if you're bringing a car, because of the pollution it will do, we make a charge, but that money doesn't go to us. It goes, a lot of campsites, that would just go in the pocket of the campsite owner. But actually, if you say to people, we think a bit bigger than that, I think there's a great opportunity to get people thinking, just like you say, Simon, a bit more about things they can do in their own lives.
I think that's the engagement and influence piece that's really key, because if you look at going back to very briefly to the carbon footprint side of this, if you look at your campsite and your organisation, it's a very low carbon kind of business, and therefore there's two options there. You go, okay, great, I won't do anything. Or you go, actually, here's a great opportunity to influence others and really have that positive impact and start that. And you can't quantify it, which is why it's perhaps a little bit unsatisfying, but going, here's the conversations we're starting, here's the influence we're having at a bigger level, that you don't know what those people are going home and driving home and having a conversation about and going, oh, do you know what? I didn't realise that I had to pay £2 for my petrol car because it's actually generated, 10% of that campsite's emissions is from just me driving there, rather than if I was an electric, or if I got the train into Lewis or something like that. So it is like knowing how you can use those levers to really influence people in a way that is beyond just your carbon footprint, that gets lost a lot, I think, in the perhaps accountancy exercise of it all.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's seeing where those opportunities are and just trying to capitalize on them when you can.
In terms of you mentioned you're putting solar panels and a few other things in recently. I just wanted to dig into the financials a little bit more of, payback periods. Is that something that you've taken a hit on? Has it been quite a painful experience in terms of being a leader in the industry and perhaps putting EV charging in or solar panels in? And I know you mentioned that the showers were more expensive than if it was a traditional build. Is that something that you've had difficulty with? Has it been something that you're quite happy with looking back? What's your sort of feelings on?
You'd need to probably ask the rest of my family whether they were happy with it, because maybe just have cheaper holidays. But I think it's an interesting thing. The solar PV was put in by a company called Avesco, and they are a community energy group based in Lewis. And So this was done in 2012, and there were some very good incentives for groups to put up solar PV, and they used our barn roof as a basis, a platform for them to do that. The rainwater harvesting, I mean, it's going to take me a few years before I get my money back, and particularly when you get someone who doesn't rig it up quite correctly, and they change one of the things, and you have to buy a new rainwater harvesting pump, which is probably what's about to happen. But I think you just have to be philosophical about stuff like that. You're running a business; things do break, things do go wrong, and not everything pays back immediately. But I think if you've got, my principles are that actually, if I can do it, I think I should try and do it. We use good energy. They're our electricity supplier. It'd be very easy and much cheaper to use other people. I mean, Octopus were another option, but they weren't really around when we first started using good energy, or not that I was aware of. So there's lots of tweaks you can make. The supplier of electricity makes a big difference on what actually and where that money ends up going. We at home I use Ecotricity, and I've used them since 2001, and I know that I've been paying more for my electricity. I'm a bit miffed that I still pay more, even when actually now it's cheaper for them to produce it. But I think you have to just take some sort of principles on stuff like that. It's going to be like that. We use local suppliers. I know that I could sell beer more cheaply from the campsite, but the beer that we get is made 3 miles away. We sell Harvey's, and we sell Only With Love beer. The ciders come from the Ashdown Forest. So the footprint of these things is much better. And even though they may cost a bit more, you're getting some trade into, you're spreading the revenue from alcohol sales to more people than if you just buy Stella.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is it the AB Bev or whoever the big ones are that own 50% of the market or something insane? And it's like, I'm sure they'll survive without a few more cans being sold. And I think it is.
And also,
that
you're on holiday. You want to
relationship.
try something different.
Yeah, well, precisely. And those people would never encounter some of those drinks otherwise. So it's got to be good. And you might actually hate it, but you might like it and say, actually, let's get some of that before we go back. So I think it's not just about the energy issues. It's also about the economy issues. I mean, I know that's part of that whole circular economy, but where's it coming from? The bottles from Harvey's, I can collect them and I can return them. So all of a sudden, Harvey's will deliver to me. I can give the bottles back like you used to do when you were little kids, and you'd get some glass bottles and you get a refund. Well, we get that now with the bottles of Harvey's that people drink here, which I think that's quite nice. I wish the wood sacks people could do the same with these horrible little orange mesh wood sacks that I don't. No one wants those, unless there's somebody on the blog. If there's someone listening now who needs, 20,000 wood sacks, mesh ones.
I'm sure there's someone out there can do something with them. I'm imagining like when I used to, some of the coffee shops in Brighton that had the old kind of bean bags that were made out of old coffee bean bags, quite literally. There must be something like that, some sort of solution there we can find.
I've tried, and I love it as well. So maybe there's got to be a good way of publicising this. It was like the aerosol cans. People use their gas aerosol cans, and nobody will take them because they say there could be gas in them. I've at last found one of the local recycling yards that will actually take them. As they said, that as long as you don't bring them in like you're a commercial business, then we'll take them off your hands, as long as they're empty. So yeah, there's still stuff that needs attention. In terms of the recycling, I'm still encountering some things that are difficult to put into a circular economy. They're just going to go, the wood sacks, they're just going to end up in the incinerator at Newhaven. I know it. It's
difficult, but I think that's where you do have to draw the lines of being what's practical and what you can do and do as much as you can. Because again, those wood sacks, I can't imagine, compared to the size of site you've got and the amount of visitors you're having, it's still probably quite a small sort of operational waste piece, even though it's going to be quite visible, partly because they're orange, which isn't going to be helping.
And I think that's part of the whole thing, which is it's small and it's looking for other small local businesses to do it. So there's a guy, Michael Kennard. You must know Michael Kennard from Compost Club.
I do, yeah.
And he collects all of our food waste. So for the first few years the campsite was open, you just see people emptying food waste into a bin because the council wouldn't collect any commercial waste. And then I eventually tracked down Michael Kennard and his compost club, it's been a breath of fresh air. So now he'll come out and pick up all the food waste that we can produce here. It gets recycled, reused, and we get a free bag of compost at the end of the year. It's brilliant. It costs a bit of money, but I look at that and I think it would be cheaper, of course, just to put it in the bins and let the council take it away. But that's, you're not going to go forward like that, are you?
No, and I think it's the story that you can tell around this, which is the key thing, is all of this is really hard to quantify the marketing impact of going, actually, this is what is going to be making you, well, one, it's the reason why you are the first person that I emailed to ask if you wanted to come on the podcast, because I was like, I know you've got a really interesting story to tell. So we're going to dive into loads of kind of weird and wonderful stuff, as I said at the start, of, orange sacks and food waste and beer return systems and all of this that's kind of, fizzing away. So there's going to be, from a commercial point of view, opportunities here around marketing that wouldn't otherwise be there if you were just a normal profit first campsite that was squeezing, only making decisions based on financial rather than including that environmental piece. And that's what makes you stand out. And there is potentially that just, you don't necessarily need to advertise quite as much or spend as much money on marketing, because people are going to find you through word of mouth in a much more friendly, I think, and you're going to get the right type of customer. And I think that's a really important thing that businesses often forget, is knowing who your customer is. And we're drifting back into Simon and I's old podcasting days of the bullshit busters and digital marketing now, but I think it's key to keep that in mind of going, there are wrong customers out there for you that are going to be people you do not want.
I see. And I
kind
think
of with you.
I think it's a really interesting thing, because when we first opened the campsite, one of the things that you've got no idea is how busy you're going to be, who's going to be this person who's going to come through your door, because day one, you haven't had any customers. And quite quickly, you start to work out the sort of people that are going to be attracted to you. But you also start working out the sort of people you definitely don't want to come to your campsite, because they're going to change the feeling of it. And, you've got pricing is a good way of doing that. But one of the things we sort of quite quickly set up was we had a few no's to the campsite. One of them was no dogs. And I've got a dog myself, but actually a lot of people don't like dogs. Some people are scared of dogs. Dogs crap everywhere. Dogs bark. Actually, if you're creating a space that's all about wildlife, what you don't want is loads of dogs snuffling around in the grass and scaring all the creatures away. We also said we didn't want to have any groups, because when you've got 10 families camping together, the dynamic of the site and the centre of gravity of the site completely changes. And if you've got just, couples or maybe a couple of families camping together, it's a much gentler and much more peaceful experience. We didn't have any cars in the camping area. So one of the things we said was, you'll arrive at the barn, you'll unload all of your possessions into wheelbarrows, and then you can take these wheelbarrows over to your pitch. And for some people, they look at it and they say, well, it's ridiculous. Can I just drive over and unload over there? And what is that's the sort of person you just don't really want at your campsite, because they're not really that interested in the peace and tranquility you're trying to create in that space, or the fact that you're making it a lot safer for kids. If you've got children exploring through the undergrowth and there's cars driving around, 5 yards away, it just feels like that's not going to work very well. We also have a, quiet time. It gets to 10 o'clock and everybody kind of knows that it's peaceful. It's not about, a stag party getting pissed and loads of noise. And sometimes it'll be three ladies who had a bit of wine and they'll start shouting. But it's just keeping an eye on that. It's so rare now that we get problems, because I think the ethos of the site has gone through, and the people that get it recommended, that's what they're looking for. Sometimes one of my great things is having a 1-star review. If you look at reviews on any directory, you probably stop looking at the 5-star reviews. You probably start looking at the 1-star reviews and thinking, well, what don't they do? Where have they messed up? Yeah. And that's the best place to get your marketing messages seen, because actually, if you've got a 1-star review because you didn't have a play park at the campsite, perfect. For me, that's perfect, because anyone who wants a play park is going to find our site just the worst place to go. Yeah. If you're the sort of person who looks at the 1-star review and says they haven't got a play park, brilliant. That sounds like the sort of place. So it's very easy to see all the negative reviews as being bad. Sometimes they're like gold dust. Somebody will say something and that's actually summed up your site so perfectly that anyone reading that will think, yeah, this sounds like a place I'd like to go.
It's a really interesting reflection. I had never thought of that as like quite a coy marketing tactic. I really like that. It's very
well. I think
it's exactly right. If like
isn't it?
Yeah. I've done it before as well, where I've looked at, as you say, negative reviews. I've been like, oh, the person who's left that review is clearly an idiot. It's probably fine, just and I'd gone ahead and bought stuff anyway. So
the hard ones are the reviews we used to get on Facebook, and I think they're probably still there. You'd get a 0 out of 5 on Facebook from somebody who'd never been to the campsite, and they've just literally gone and reviewed it. But again, it's really difficult. It's difficult to know what to do with those. I used to respond, and then I just thought, you can't respond to everything. Sometimes you've got to leave it. I do broadly respond to reviews because I think, it's someone who's taken the effort to post something. It's quite nice to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Agreed. And I think it just demonstrates that connection you've got with them as well.
So thinking about what's next for the campsite, Tim, what's the next project that you've got bubbling away working on now?
Well, the one I'm really working on is the Businesses into Nature project. And we did a couple of tryouts last year with Community Energy South, which is a group in the Lewis area. And we did one with PropellerNet. And they both seem to be very popular. So we've started doing this 24 hours in nature. But one of the things that sort of evolved from that is that not everybody's got 24 hours that they can take their team out of work for. And yet nature's still a really great place for people to spend some time together. So we started doing some, I would call them 4 hours in nature, and we can do some 12 hours in nature. But the idea is that it's getting a team away from their normal environment. So doing a dawn chorus walk. And we've done 3 dawn chorus walks this year. We've done some bat walks. We've done some nightingale evenings. And the idea is just to get people over for probably 4 hours. The dawn chorus walks, it's quite hard work, that one, because I have to get up and light the fire at 3:00. And then the walk starts at sort of 4:15. And then they've gone back to work by 7:30. So actually, you can do some of these events before you've even gone into work. Or if you're doing a bat walk, you can arrive at 7:38 in the evening, have supper, have a talk about bats, go for a bat walk, and be back sitting around the campfire at 10:30 and home by 11:30. So some of those are really great opportunities to get teams into nature without necessarily the same level of commitment or the same budget. But, you could do a bat walk in the evening and a dawn chorus walk in the morning and not have missed any work time. You'd be tired. You'd be really tired. For me, it's those things they're really in the crosshairs of what we're focusing on at the moment. It's always, staffing's always a fun thing because this year we decided that we would try and get someone who would be a bit more full-time with the work. So we've applied for some accommodation for a warden on the site, and it's having somebody who can take care of the day-to-day of the camping and give me a bit more time to focus on trying to develop the business proposition a bit, which is, it's using some of my weaknesses. So social media, which I'm not particularly great with. I've started trying to do stuff on LinkedIn. So understanding that, I went on a really great course run by a guy called David Hyatt. I don't know if you've ever heard the Do lectures.
Yeah.
Well, I've done a couple of his courses, and he's a very inspiring figure, and he kind of sums things up and keeps you engaged. I don't know if you're on his email list. I get every email I get, I read it, and I find myself having read the whole of his email. That may just be me, but I think he has a great way of writing. So, it's for me, the real focus is on how do I raise the profile of the proposition and make use of some of the media that I'm not yet particularly familiar with.
It feels like a big growth opportunity for you in terms of the amount of businesses that are wanting to reconnect with nature a bit more and understand their environmental impacts. And you can take them on that tour and show them what that looks like. And I think, just the buildings that you've got there, the impact the electric vehicles charging has had on behaviour change. There's the whole scale there. If you can either go from the carbon footprint end through to the nature biodiversity space, and all those businesses in Brighton, Lewis, and surrounding areas are going to need to be joining on that journey.
Brighton's it's a good place for businesses like that. And actually, I mean, one of the things that I think I really am trying to work is, how do you take them from the point where you introduce them to nature and you give them a sense about biodiversity? So it's explaining to them about the crisis that nature is encountering, and talking to a business about that, and getting the business to think about, okay, so what can we do? But there's so many other opportunities when you've got their attention. There's energy, there's travel, there's food, there's all of these areas, the circular economy, all these areas that are really important to tackle. And so it's trying to craft something that actually enables you to deliver. Maybe it's not really a project, an event. I don't know whether it's a session. Mm-hmm. It's something where actually a business says, we should do this. We should do this thing that looks at our business's carbon footprint. And maybe, Adam, that's probably where, we should be talking about, are there opportunities? Are there ways that we could get small teams of people to spend 12 hours here doing a day where they spend some time in nature and they spend some time actually tackling their own business problems?
Well, I think it's the experience of this, because it can feel very dry. And I think a lot of the time we were talking about climate or carbon, it does feel very, not imagined, but very, very far away, and it's not that exciting, and it, you can put it in a drawer and forget about it. Whereas I think if you're taking out to people to a site and going like, look, this is the impact that 3 weeks of dry weather has had on our campsite and how we operate, and here's how the rainwater harvesting system works for the winter. And there's a story there you can build that is far more believable and far more impactful than sitting in a classroom and going through a series of slides about doesn't everything look bad. And it's something that we've tried to develop and move away from slightly, is that slide-based experience, because it's not an experience, it's an ordeal, and people often switch off. Yeah, I think you're onto a winner there, and I'm really excited to see how it goes. Definitely.
Well, yeah, and for me, it's also being quite clear about what your limitations are. My limitations is I'm not an expert on any of these things. The reason we have a wildlife guide is because I know a bit about wildlife. I probably know a bit more than the average person, but actually having someone who's really expert, who can explain all about the different types of bats and why they behave like they do, and why you're most likely to see them there, or why these moths are the ones that we've got in the trap today, or let's look at this, we've got adders here. What is it about these adders that is making this place a good spot for them? So if you're going to do that about energy, you want an energy expert to do that session. If you're going to do that about food, you want someone who knows about, food to do that. I think the way we've landscaped the site here has always been about biodiversity. Everyone's got a garden. There's got to be loads of opportunities to say to people, look, here's our garden space, and this is what we've done to try and offset some of the issues that nature's facing. So it's for me, actually, all I'm doing is trying to create a bit of a canvas, and then what you need all the experts to come in and say, okay, I can do that bit for you, and off they go and deliver it. And that's the fun of it, isn't it? Working with people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before, as we kind of come in towards the end of it, what is one tip you would give for businesses?
I think, the thing, I just don't give up. Don't give up, because it's really easy. And the amount of times I've thought, oh, what am I doing this for? You're banging your head against a brick wall. The money's gone dry. You're looking at all those things, but actually you just have to keep saying to yourself, no, keep going.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive message, because I think it can be hard, especially in all sorts of areas of business, but particularly when you're leading the way or doing something first, or being the first person in your local area or community to try something different. I think that energy and enthusiasm can be hard to muster some days. So it's a really positive message to share with people, because I think it's definitely a frustration. But
it must be relevant for both of you two as well, I would think. You stick with what you do, you know what you're doing, and you know it's the right thing to be doing. So you say you'll hit a bad time, but you say, no, just keep going, because you will, you'll make the difference that you want to make.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for sharing with us, Tim. It's been really insightful to talk to you and hear from your story. Where can people find out more about the Secret Campsite?
Just go to the website, thesecretcampsite.co.uk, and I should now say this, or you should go on LinkedIn and you can find Tim Bullen on LinkedIn and join in the conversation. The site's all about wildlife, so we try to put things up there that are relevant. So if you want to see an adder, go and have a look on the LinkedIn page.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. I will put links to both of those in the description of the podcast and also underneath the video. So do check those out. And thank you very much, Tim. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening and watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
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 Let's cut the bullshit.
Just drop the job.
Adam and Simon's bullshit.